To dzień dobry Państwu. Mamy obecnie 25 uczestników naszego spotkania. Wiem, że więcej osób się zapisało na nasz wykład, ale myślę, że w trakcie wykładu po prostu reszta będzie mogła dołączyć, więc chciałam już wszystkich Państwa przywitać. Dzień dobry wszystkim uczestnikom. Nasz dzisiejszy wykład będzie odbywał się po angielsku, stąd ja za chwilę też przywitam się po angielsku. Całość też jest dla informacji Państwa nagrywana. Całość wykładu, też będzie możliwość odsłuchania tego wykładu później, wykład pojawi się również na naszej stronie Narodowego Instytutu Architektury i Urbanistyki. Zatem dzień dobry, witam serdecznie. Good evening, my name is Katarzyna Domagacka and on behalf of National Institute of Architecture and Urban Planning, I would like to invite you for lecture Dr Claus-Peter Echter. The title of this lecture is Tools and Methods of Preserving of Historic Towns. The lecture is organized as a part of Project Regions Laboratory. The project in our institute started in 2020, and the main goal of this project is protecting the architectural and urban integrity and identity of the regions. The main task of the project is to increase awareness of knowledge about the architectural and urban heritage in Poland, understood as cultural heritage. The result of this project is publication Manual for Polish Regions, called Toolkit for Regions. The first Polish region is Warmia and Mazury, and in our research we focus on the small towns with the historical background. Very important issue for our project is cooperation in national and international level. The National Institute of Architecture and Urban Planning cooperates with the Faculty of Architecture of the Warsaw University of Technology and the Department of Landscape Architecture of University of Warmia and Mazury. The project is based on the exchange of international experience in the fields of protection of culture and landscape heritage. In 2021, we participate in study trips to Mecklenburg and North Rhine-Westphalia. The international project partners are Gertrude Hauptmann House Foundation and National Office for the Protection of Monuments in Mecklenburg and the Embassy of the Republic of Poland in Berlin. So I invite Piotr to you.
Thank you very much, Katarzyna, and a very warm welcome from my side. My name is Piotr Hart, and I am collaborator of the National Institute of Architecture and Urban Planning in the project of the Laboratory of Regions. I will introduce our speaker in a moment, but first let me explain briefly what will be happening. In a moment, Dr Claus-Peter Echter will speak about 40 minutes. There will be some time after the lecture to ask questions, so please do feel free to come forward with them. You can write questions on the chat or ask directly after the lecture. We will end roughly around 5 p.m. But to the main business of this afternoon, it gives me a great pleasure to introduce our speaker. Dr Claus-Peter Echter is a scientific heritage consultant based in Munich in Germany. He works on European and international level. He is specialized in urban conservation and for over 20 years has been a senior researcher at the German Institute of Urban Affairs, focusing on issues of heritage conservation and the history of urban architecture. Dr. Echter is a vice president and honorary member of Europa Nostra Germany, a member of ICOMOS, and an expert member of 2 ICOMOS international scientific committees on historic towns and villages and on shared built heritage. Dr. Echter is the immediate past president of the Committee on Historic Towns and Villages, the seat that he held until the end of last year. And Dr. Echter has published many books and articles on a wide range of issues such as architectural history, cultural landscape, renaissance of the living in the inner city, and monument preservation. We are delighted and honored that he's here with us today to explore what the heritage of historical towns and villages has to say in the sustainable development of our regions. Thank you for joining us and taking your time today. And now I give floor to Dr. Claus-Peter Echter.
Thank you very much for your introduction. That was really, I'm really pleased, and thank you very much for this. I will speak on tools and methods of protecting the heritage of historical towns, and let me tell about the table of contents. First is introduction, and second is contemporary practice and key priorities with regard to urban heritage. And thirdly, on the history of urban monument preservation in Germany. And fourth, fundamental instruments to urban monument preservation. And I will speak, this is the biggest part of my speech with 8 instruments. And fifth, conclusion. Thank you so much for your invitation to this special event. It is a great pleasure and honor for me to give a speech here at the National Institute of Architecture and Urban Planning in Warsaw, Poland. Mr. Hart, he has spoken about me and about my work and studies. So I don't need to add, because he has done it in really a good way. Second, contemporary practice and key priorities with regard to urban heritage. Fundamental for the heritage of historical towns are the Valletta principles. Please, next slide. For the safeguarding and management of historic cities, towns and urban areas, which have been elaborated by CIVVIH and have been adopted by ICOMOS in 2011. CIVVIH has defined the objectives, attitudes, and tools needed and took into consideration the significant evolution in definitions and methodologies on the safeguarding and management of historic towns and urban areas. CIVVIH researches and promotes the understanding. Okay. Protection, conservation, urban planning, and management of historic cities, towns, villages, and urban areas. The conservation of heritage in cities is a commitment to the historic layers of the city. The aim is to preserve the historical fabric and basic structure of the city and to illustrate the local historical dimensions in future urban development. The main task of urban heritage conservation is to research, protect, and maintain the architectural documents of the past that give a city its unmistakable identity. There is a lot to be done in our field, in the study and research on issues pertaining to the protection of heritage, abandonment, large works, tourism, sustainable development, and now climate change. In historic towns, villages, urban areas, and historical landscapes. Second, in the development of the work of ICOMOS for the contribution of culture and heritage in the sustainable development of towns, villages, and urban areas. And third, in the study of the repercussions of climate change on urban heritage. My vision is to contribute to developing solutions and taking action in towns and communities in implementing the new urban agenda to accelerate the achievement of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, by 2030, with a particular emphasis on urban regeneration, especially in the context of climate change. We all have to promote cities for all that are socially inclusive and participative, affordable, accessible, and equitable, economically vibrant and inclusive, collectively managed and democratically governed. Cities that are regenerative and resilient, have shared identities and sense of place. Resilience is the most important topic now. The COVID-19 pandemic is urging all towns to urgently respond to a global crisis that threatens not only the health of the population, but the economy, infrastructure, and social cohesion of the human settlements. In some areas, the current health crisis has increased the pressure on local authorities to act. This is particularly true for the inner cities, whose functional change will be massively accelerated by the expected business closures. The pandemic also shows us how important green and other open spaces are. Urban green and a newly conceived distribution of public space based on new concepts of mobility are indispensable. Considering the far-reaching impact of the pandemic, these urgent demands have to be addressed without panic. Rather, the pandemic could be seen as an opportunity for cooperation, solidarity, and new impulse for sustainable development. Resilience in historic cities is an integrative process with the social, environmental, and economic components meeting the challenges of social inclusion, the digital revolution, and sustainable development. The CIVVIH webinar in June 2020, Resilience of Historic Cities in Times of COVID-19, was a successful exchange on practices and examples that went beyond theory to integrate or develop solutions to local economy issues with social and human dimensions in the heritage and cultural context. The approach of the UNESCO 2011, you can see it here, recommendation on the historic urban landscape helps to better integrate urban heritage conservation into strategies for resilient neighborhoods, livable cities, socio-economic development, and planning tools. There's a worldwide interest in this approach, which is endorsed by UNESCO. It is a helpful and appropriate tool for resilient historic towns, and I will speak further on it also. Thirdly, on the history of urban monument preservation in Germany. The German history of the revival of interest in historic towns as a field of activity of urban heritage conservation dates back to the 1970s and is generally associated with the passing of the Urban Development Promotion Act of 1971. I don't know if this is the same in Poland, that the history of monument preservation, urban monument preservation dates from the 1970s. This history is associated with the passing of the Urban Development Promotion Act and the new monument protection laws in West German states between 1972 and 1980. The steps were the beginning around 1900, the old towns in the 1920s and 1930s, and other steps, the reconstruction and post-war period, and 1975 and the consequences. The emergence of urban monument preservation as a task area of urban monument preservation falls into the 1970s. However, the beginnings of urban monument preservation go back to the time around 1900. Since the turn of the century, the interaction between the monument and its surrounding, as well as the protection of historical traditions spanning several objects or of extensive structures worthy of preservation, have been topics in the theory and practice of monument preservation. In his book, Der Städtebau nach seinen künstlerischen Grundsätzen, Urban Planning according to its artistic principles, published in 1889, Camillo Sitte from Austria used the term ensemble in an urban planning artistic sense for the first time. The aim of the monument preservation efforts at that time was less the preservation of urban contexts than their design. After all, it was already known that the urban layout was one of the city's most precious monuments, and that the traditional cityscape was also of special importance. Old town preservation seemed possible, if at all at the beginning of the 20th century, only in historically characterized small towns, such as Rothenburg ob der Tauber or Nördlingen in Germany, which were considered as city monuments. At the end of the 1920s, a number of larger German cities, such as Frankfurt am Main, Cologne, and Hanover, made initial planning considerations for the redevelopment of old towns, which resulted in radical interventions in the historic urban structure with street breakthroughs and extensive gutting as a result of improvements and old town rehabilitation. Remarkable is the diverse observance of the urban structure in the reconstruction of the cities after the Second World War. While some of them rather realized the concept of a reconstruction true to the original, others more strongly realized the idea of a new building adapted to the modern function of the city. Munich, Freiburg, and Münster are exemplary for conservative reconstruction under the motto, preserve structure, for a modern reconstruction in the style of Neues Bauen and with a focus on Kassel, Hanover, and Stuttgart. The architectural and urban planning results of post-war development in the cities provoked criticism as early as the 1960s. Wolf-Josef Siedler, 1964, lamented the disregard for the residential districts of historicism, he called it the murdered city. And in 1965, Alexander Mitscherlich denounced the inhospitality of the cities. His subtitle was Anstiftung zum Unfrieden, Incitement to Discord. It was not until the early 1970s that the principle of preserving cautious urban renewal prevailed over area redevelopment and the widespread demolition mentality, which has been before. Historic preservation was not prepared for this, neither conceptually, nor methodologically, nor in terms of personnel. The European Year of Monument Protection, here you see the slides, in 1975, was groundbreaking for monument preservation and especially for urban monument preservation. The historical ensemble and its protection were the focus of the traveling exhibition, A Future for Our Past, initiated by the German National Committee. Despite the growing awareness of monuments, the stock of monuments in the Western Federal States was further decimated in the 1980s. The stock of old buildings in the GDR was in a strikingly poor condition due to decades of neglect. The GDR citizens' discontent with the decay of the historic city centers can be seen as one of the triggers for the political upheaval of 1989 and 1990. At the beginning of the 1990s, conservationists also became increasingly and painfully aware that individual monuments really come into their own in ensembles, in cities, and even in entire cultural landscape. But said it was precisely this aspect that could hardly be given any weight in practice. A successful funding program, Urban Monument Protection, was launched in the East and extended to the Western Federal States in 2009. The aim of this successful funding program is to preserve and renew the architectural and cultural historical integrity of valuable city centers beyond the individual monument streets and squares. The comprehensive manual Handbuch städtebauliche Denkmalpflege here, first edition 2013, second edition 2019, offers for the first time an overview of the basics of urban monument preservation in Germany with its fundamental articles in Germany. The Getty publication, next slide, please. Also from 2019, Historic Cities, Issues in Urban Conservation serves as an easy but internationally renowned reference faced with the day-to-day challenges confronting the historic towns under siege by rampant development. Fourth, fundamental instruments to urban monument preservation. Some time ago, I published 2 books in German on the topics, Fundamental Principles and Aids for Urban Monument Preservation in Germany, Berlin 1999, and Monument Topography, a recording tool and cultural history enterprise, in Berlin 2006. This was my PhD thesis, the results of which have been incorporated into the 2 publications mentioned above, the one from Germany and the other one from America. The recording and analysis methods of urban monument preservation are spatially and constitutively oriented towards the objects of protection of the monument list. The spatial dimension of the monument can be the object of research, the case of investigation, or the task of documentation. The urban methods of inventory recording differ from those in the general inventory for monuments. They are mostly planning related and oriented towards current planning. Not the individual object, but the urban context, not the current, but also future measures are to be assessed. At the center of the assessment is the historical significance of the monuments in the current urban planning order in which they are placed. 4.1, Monument Topography. The published series Monument Topography encompasses and describes monument within the context of place and space, and also occasionally in the cultural landscape. The monuments and ensembles blanketing a tract of land systematically illustrate monument topography through texts, images, and mapping. With the help of this series of surveys organized by cities and county, all monuments in Germany are to be described and documented as uniformly as possible. An instrument for mediation of monuments, monument topography, is classified between a monument inventory and the more in-depth scholarly treatment of a survey, in German Inventar. Monument topography is highly valued in federal and local preservation efforts as a topical method for describing and documenting monuments. Germany's series of monument topographies is unprecedented in Europe in its role as information source for preservation and basis for land use planning. With the help of this series of publications, a catalogue of monuments in German states has been systematically published since 1980. At the same time, the series relates fundamental art history and information for current planning and building in cities and counties while promoting awareness of history and monuments to the public. It started in 1980, and now in 2022, we have about, let's say, between 250 and 300, but this is only half of the planned monument topographies. New requirements have been demanded for monument topography since the 1990s through the incorporation of monument site in the historical cultural landscape. In recent topography volumes, the preface, which gained considerably meaning in the 1980s, describes exemplarily the historical cultural landscape of each region. The main text comprises analytical characterization of the monuments, which is executed in essays and images of differing forms. In some states, archaeological monuments are also included. The qualities of historical structures, whole facilities, and cities must be captured for the purpose of preventive conservation. This is very important, preventive conservation. In the monument topographies, historians document and communicate necessary values indispensable for all phases of planning. Monument topography is an instrument that communicates historical urban meaning. It is an information source for everyone connected to building and serves as a fundamental material for preparing urban construction plans, zoning plans, development plans, and preservation statutes. Monument topographies are valuable for understanding the built environment and the prerequisites of developing sustainable concepts for preservation and design planning for cultural heritage. Monument topography guarantees that the requirements of historic preservation are integrated early in public and private planning processes. This instrument is meaningful as an inventory and to planning. Next slide, please. Here you can see a map of a historic city center from Limburg. Next slide, please. And this is a sample of a typical object description with the text, with images, and with a map. Third, eras of, second, for two, City Center Atlas Baden-Württemberg. Townsend, it's okay. Townsend Atlases, there are two images for this map of, for this town, City Center Atlases, or Townsend Atlases. They are a special form of the nationally published monument topography. The Atlas of Town Centers was compiled in Baden-Württemberg from 1979 to 1998, and then discontinued in favor of the monument topography. The Atlas work, conceived as a series, consists of a sequence of 21 individual volumes of towns. I think it's interesting for you because it's it's a smaller towns like you are researching, that were published. The atlas presents existing or essentially preserved urban or village core areas of the state. Based on the list of monuments, the atlas booklets are the result of in-depth investigations into urban development, as it can still be seen in the townscape or in the totality of the urban context. The building structures of historic town and village centers are shown in aerial photographs. After a description of the geographical location and transport links, the urban development, the urban layout, and urban form are described, and the coherent historical buildings are listed according to streets and squares. In the more recent atlas contributions, archaeological monuments and excavation protection areas are also presented, and cultural landscape aspects are also included. As in-depth expert reports on the designation of complete facilities with special cultural historical significance, the booklets have become a clear and valuable informational tool for urban development and for all structure and planning consideration in the context of the old town. Third, for 4.3, eras of construction plan for urban renewal in Bavaria. Thematic mapping can be represented like in areas of construction plan. This map, next slide, please. This map is a methodical approach and instrument for the recording of monuments and a component of the historical site analysis. In general, these plans are developed to obtain an overview of the age of buildings in the city or a complex as well as a construction phases of a building. Building age plans, in which today, in addition to dating, according to time periods, the results of city core archaeology, building history investigations, the evaluation of archives, or chronological research are topographically mapped, have a long tradition. Their beginnings date back to the end of the 19th century, as evidenced by the Mannheim Building Age Plan from 1899, an incunabulum of historical and monumental urban analysis is the so-called Art Historical Atlas of Vienna by Hugo Hassinger, published in 1916. The 1960s and 1970s saw a sharp increase in the number of area redevelopments in the old town centers. The preservation of historical monuments had to apply instruments in order to be able to carry out an early and object-wide preservation of monuments. In 1971, in Bavaria, a special series of publications related to the problems of redevelopment has been invented by the Bavarian State Office for the Preservation of Monuments and some municipalities. They should serve as part of the preparatory study of urban renewal. The areas of construction plans contain an area-wide inventory of the respective city monument and its individual buildings in words, images, and an overview plan. You saw this overview plan. Due to the limited information available on monuments at the time, the instrument was restricted to the towns of Amberg, 1972, Burghausen, 1978, and Regensburg, 10 volumes, 1973 to 1993. In general, the eras of construction plan is indispensable as a method of historic analysis for the recording and evaluation of historic areas. With the help of its mapping, it contributes to a better understanding of historical sites and forms, into important working basis for the development of concepts and plans for urban conservation and planning. 4.4, monument conservation target planning. The monument target planning for the preservation of historical monuments is a planning instrument that, like the more comprehensive monument preservation plans, it serves to preserve urban structures. This instrument was developed in Schleswig-Holstein as a predecessor of the Townsend Atlases. The target plans were drawn up by the Schleswig-Holstein State Office for the Preservation of Monuments as preliminary investigation into the planned urban renewal measures and were incorporated into the urban development framework plans from 1972 Schleswig to 1994 Bordesholm, really small towns. Target plans for the preservation of historical ensembles were submitted for around 50 towns and municipalities in Schleswig-Holstein. In view of the lack of funds for urban renewal development, target plans have been developed since 1993, primarily for village areas. The Monument Conservation Target Plan consists of a plan drawing and text. In the target planning is original settlement structure, listed buildings, monument protection zones, typical local streets and squares, green spaces and water areas, buildings worthy of preservation, and buildings and street edges, inadequately the buildings that really don't fit into the structure, and parts of building mapped, the building fabric classified, the streets and squares assessed, and design deficiencies pointed out. The heritage conservation target planning has proven to be a helpful and effective planning instrument in urban renewal and in cooperation with the redevelopment municipalities. With target planning, it has been possible to bring the historical perspective into the municipal planning process and to keep the bridge to the past intact. After the publication of the first monument topographies in Schleswig-Holstein, the work on target planning ended because the monument topographies have taken over many of the functions of the monument conservation target planning. 4.5, Monument Preservation Plan. A monument, yes, and this was the target planning. This is a legend. I wanted to show you the legend of this plan. And now, next slide, the Monument Preservation Plan, mainly in North Rhine-Westphalia. A monument, but not only. A monument management plan is a municipal or sub-municipal plan, also for historic areas, for the development and controlling of municipal heritage preservation. The Municipal Monument Preservation Plan was first introduced by law in 1980 in North Rhine-Westphalia. The states Brandenburg, Saxony-Anhalt, and Thuringia have adopted this instrument in a version. As a new instrument, the municipalities are obliged to make a cultural and historical contribution to urban development planning and to continue to develop it. The content of the Monument Preservation Plan falls under the municipal self-government, unless prescribed by law. The minimum content in the example of North Rhine-Westphalia. The following should be shown in drawings: an inventory and analysis of the development of the settlement history of the municipality, the location of the monuments and archaeological sites, protected areas, and buildings worthy of preservation for reasons of cultural history. Furthermore, for information purposes, the representations and determinations from statutes on listed buildings, urban land use planning, and the conservation and design statutes, insofar as they serve the protection of monuments. Here you can see a map of the proposed historically characterized area in a small part of, which is a rural part of the city of Bonn-Beul. The part of the text is intended to justify and explain the heritage preservation plan and firstly describes the aims of the protection and preservation of monuments in the municipality. Secondly, the settlement history of the municipality and its analysis, and justifies the monuments, archaeological sites, historic areas, and describes the building fabric worthy of preservation for historical reasons. And thirdly, to elaborate an action concept with cost and financing consideration for the definition of objectives, requirements, and measures for the protection, conservation, and use of the monuments, in particular within the framework of urban development of the city. This third part is really the most difficult part, with this as an action concept and with cost and financing consideration. The experiences with the instruments are predominantly positive. They are reflected in particular in the professional presentation of a major concern of urban development planning, in the early provision of information to authorities and planners, and in the comprehensive information of the interested public. And the interested public is something really important now. 4.6, Municipal Monument Concept. The Municipal Monument Concept is an instrument developed by the Bavarian State Office for the Preservation of Monuments, for the preservation and use of historical values within the framework of municipal development. The recording, presentation, and communication of heritage values in the settlement and structural contexts are supplemented by a planning section for the formulation of urban planning and heritage guidelines, and an implementation section with prioritized measures for the preservation and sensible use of these values in the context of local development, as well as exemplary implementation projects. The municipal heritage concept as a future strategy for dealing with the municipal historical heritage is not standardized in terms of method and content, and is not subject to any formal procedure. The content and objectives can therefore be adapted to the local framework conditions, the questions and problems of the respective municipality. It differs from the legally anchored heritage conservation plans in some German states, in particular by the site-specific working scale and the approach of fundamental voluntariness. For how much time I have? Not much, I think, so I will come to the end. 4.7, concept of historic urban landscapes. New approaches like the historic urban landscape to development are needed, and this should be integrated into the protection of his towns and urban areas. The HAL recommendation is such a new approach or tool and process for assisting in the management of cultural and urban heritage. You can see here about the topics. Urban heritage fosters economic development to achieve a balance between urban growth and quality of life on a sustainable basis. And the aim is to integrate policies into the wider goal of urban development in respect of the inherited values and tradition of wider cultural contexts. It also includes the social and cultural practice and values, human activities, as well as economic processes. The historic urban landscape adopted by UNESCO in 2011 is defined as an urban area understood as a result of historic layering of cultural and natural values and attributes extending beyond the notion of historic center or ensemble to include the broader urban context and its geographical setting. I have a little bit more to this, but I think I will give you my speech in total, and then you can have it. And the next, the last one, 4.8, historic cultural landscape. Among the monument topographies, there are volumes that focus on building types such as a historic cultural landscape. This is a complex spatio-temporal system with differentiated and overlapping active and fossil elements. Different historic landscapes are addressed. As a custodian of the material, above all architectural historical heritage, monument preservation participates in the preservation of the historical cultural landscape. Monument, next slide, please. Exactly. And next slide, please. Okay. Monument preservation has a comprehensive recording system for cultural monuments ranging from the official list of monuments to the scientific inventory. Elements and structures of the historical cultural landscape, as well as definable cultural landscape areas, can be inserted into the system of recording. A spatial and thus cartographic component is always associated with the historic cultural landscape. For this reason, I quote, the instrument of monument topography lends itself to its representation and publication, since this is also oriented towards the spatial relationship of the monuments with its surrounding. Anyway, it's, I quoted from some conservationists, the conservationists, office conservationists in Germany. An exemplary monument topography for the topic of historic cultural landscape is one from Bavaria, the county of Tirchenreuth, near the Czech border. The volume County Tirchenreuth, published in 2000, deals with the rich cultural heritage of the district and conveys a vivid picture of the diversity of a cultural landscape between the Fichtelgebirge and the Upper Palatinate forest, determined by its border location to Bohemia and Franconia. In the monument topography, the more than 800 monuments and 7 ensembles of the district are presented, of the county are presented, against the background of the history of this area, the history of settlement, urban development, and the influence of neighboring regions. The district's historic buildings include cultural assets of European rank, such as the pilgrimage church of Kappel and the Waldsassen monastery with its Baroque basilica and library hall. Exemplary statements can be found in the monument topography, especially on the different settlement periods, village and field forms, and to a lesser extent also on urban settlement form. In the but also to not to these big monuments like monasteries, in the district, village and field forms, and to a lesser extent also on urban settlement forms. In the district, the 4- and 3-sided farmsteads dominate the rural house forms. Relatively uniform for the area of the district are the mostly gabled, clearly structured buildings. The Egerland half-timbered style is widespread in the eastern part of the northern Upper Palatinate. And this is very important for the cultural landscape, these types of rural buildings. Fifth conclusion, status and standards of fundamental instrument to urban monument preservation have been discussed during this lecture. Urban monument preservation is a multidisciplinary task in the service of monument-compatible planning for the preservation of the historical character of towns, villages, and cultural landscapes. Instruments such as monument topographies, monument conservation plans, monument conservation target planning, or the municipal monument concept are highly effective. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Echter, for really interesting lecture on really a range of issues. Let me have a look if we have some questions on the chat. We don't have. Then if there is anyone, please raise your digital hand and we will hopefully let you in to ask a question. I think I don't see questions. Then I would perhaps start with my own question. I was really interested in the Kommunales Denkmalkonzept, the Municipal Monument concept from Bavaria.
Yeah.
I just wanted to ask you if this is obligatory for small villages or it's on a voluntary basis, and how is the outcome bounding for local communities? I mean, are the outcomes of this participatory process binding in the legal dimensions of the planning?
Thank you for this question. Well, it's the Bavarian State Office has a big experience in the planning of rural villages. It's called the Denkmalkonzept of small villages, and it is binding because the development of these rural villages is also financed by the Ministry of Agriculture, and the Ministry of Agriculture is only giving this financing if there is a concept, a rural concept, and this rural concept has the same parts as this other city town concept. So well, this concept is participatory, as you said. That's the main thing, and the concept is elaborated by companies, but they have to work very hard with the Department of Urban Conservation in the Bavarian office. So they are strictly so there are three officers in the conservation office for urban conservation in Bavaria, and well, there's much experience with these three personnel because they are also they wrote this book, handbook on urban conservation for Germany, and I was also in this one who was writing in this book, and so they are very strict, and but and then it is then this concept, and this is it does not differ from this concept for the villages or for the city, for the cities, and then the cities have to incorporate this into their planning processes, the building codes and so on. Yeah, and about this this concept for villages, I think they have also a publication on this, and of course because it has been established for more than 200 villages in Bavaria. So it's really for later times a big instrument, a big recording instrument. And now they started some years ago with this city concept or town concept, and the one who is looking after this concept in the Bavarian office, he's telling me that these towns and even also cities like the city of Freising, which has about, let's say, 50,000 inhabitants, they are really eager to implement this instrument, and of course for the town center more, but also for adjacent areas. I hope I could answer your question.
Thank you very much, and it's really interesting, this communal monument concept. I just saw, I think, one example of the work of the Bavarian Office of Conservation on a really small village where they really had a chance to focus on each building. And as you said in the lecture, these several cases of implementation projects where the focus is even on a small building or the analysis of the construction. It's the scale is really interesting, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I had for the cultural what was it? This historic cultural landscape. There are also other examples interesting. The first monument topography that has been written in 1980 or 1981 was the county of Lüneburg. It's also a small county with really 2 or 3 small towns and villages. And this is also a very, very good example for historic cultural landscapes. And this has been written by later the president of the conservationists in Germany. And this is a second one. Then I could recommend also another one. It's a town called Nördlingen. There was a battle in the 18th century, but Nördlingen is not famous because of the battle, or perhaps for historians, but also because it's a city like Rodenburg ob der Tauber. So these really famous German cities. Yeah, and of course, then we have also examples for industrial development, like, and so I was doing research for all these cities and also monument topographies, and I took this. I did research in this city called Eberswalde, which is a city of, let's say, 30,000 inhabitants, so not a small town, but middle town. And this is in the near of Berlin, and it was one of the first industrial towns in Germany in the 18th century, and it was industry. There has been industry until the 20th century, and even there was a factory for houses, for typing, and even Walter Gropius, he was the architect for inventing these typical houses made from steel in the 1920s. So we have this monument topographies. There are main topics for different types of monuments.
And another chapter, as you already hinted at, the town close to Berlin would be the entire redevelopment of small towns in East Germany. The entire work which was done in the 90s and 2000s. We just been to this study trip to Mecklenburg-Vorpommern.
Yeah.
And there is so many small towns really tackling a lot of problems like issues of demography or exodus of people from small towns, how to tackle all those problems. And it seems they are doing really a lot of work to face all of those issues.
You are right. In the 1990s, the research for redevelopment or urban renewal has been mostly in eastern states, yes. But for conservation, this was really it was really good because the methods have been much better than in the 1980s and 1970s, or in the end of the 1970s. So these small towns and also middle towns and the renewal was was made better than in the Western states. So we have really. Even in towns like Rotenburg ob der Tauber or Nördlingen, or in Baden-Württemberg, there are famous heritage towns like Ladenburg or Schwäbisch Hall, Schwäbisch Gmünd. But to my point of view, the conservation in these cities is not as good as in the eastern states, because at that time, yeah, the methods have not been there. But nevertheless, you are right. The problems are much more are really much more in these states like Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. Yeah, the demography is a problem, and of course the economy, and so and the youth is going is leaving to cities, or at first in the 1990s and in 2000. The skilled people, they moved to the Western states, but not now anymore to the Western states, but now to cities like Leipzig or Dresden, or in the in Eastern Germany, because the economy there is really it's very good, and for the youth it's more interesting than to stay. In these rural, in these villages, so many old people are living there. But in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, I think they have told you, tourism is very important. And I guess because they have many lakes, and in these lakes it's lovely countrysides, and of course the Baltic Sea, and so there is tourism is really important, and even internationally spoken. Okay.
Thank you very much for your answers. Just a question: if any of our participants still wants to ask a question, do write down on the chat or just raise your hand.
It would be really, I would really I would like it, I would be pleased, because as you saw, the questions from Mr. Hart were really interesting for all. But
I think there are no questions. Then it leaves me to say once again, thank you very much, Dr. Echter. It has been very interesting, and I think our journey in the project of Laboratory of Regions, it's a really a fruitful contribution, your lecture and conversation with you. So once again, thank you very much from our side, from the side of the Institute. And also thank to all of the participants who joined us and listened to the lecture. Thank you very much.
And thank you for giving me the opportunity to give a lecture here. And I'm really pleased. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Echter, and thank you all.